It's going. And there, I just saw it go up on Facebook. Hold on, let me change my sound. Okay, we're up on Facebook.
Awesome. Let me get back here. Here we go. And we are live for our High5 Live for the month of May. And I am super, super excited. We have a special guest tonight. This is a new thing for us. So Tina, you have the big honor of being our first special guest, and we're super excited about that. I know we're going to have a couple other of our High5 members join us here as well as we get rolling tonight, and they are finishing up another call with one of our last teams. Oh, and here comes Kevin right now. All right. So thank you all for joining us tonight, and as always, we are excited to just spend some time with you, and we are unscripted. Tina and I just had a chance to meet for just a couple of minutes and found out that we are fellow Westerners. Tina is from Wisconsin, or lives in Wisconsin. Are you originally from Wisconsin, Tina?
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, I'm from Minnesota, so we have that in common. And Kevin, why don't I just kick this off to you for just a second, and why don't you just tell us how we met Tina, since that was, I think, the universe always conspires, right? That's what we believe. So. Yeah. You want to just share that story real quick?
Absolutely. So a little over, I don't know, maybe 3-4 weeks ago, something like that, we were attending a event at the United Center here in Chicago. It was Gary Vee and Tony Robbins. It was mostly Tony Robbins Day, and there were some other presenters. And Tina and her daughter, I believe, were sitting in the same row next to myself and Sylvia, and it got a little late in the day, and Tina started sharing her popcorn with us. So she gave us nutrition and sustenance to survive the Tony Robbins event, and we just got chatting during one of the breaks, and she was talking about what she does, and I asked her for her business card because I was intrigued, and here we are. So I followed up with her after the event, and I think we've got some great synergies, and I thought it would be really cool to hear about the science of positivity, and I made the offer, and here we are.
Well, I never heard about the popcorn before, so
yeah.
That explains everything.
The universe almost always brings people together through popcorn.
And I can smell it right now. I can smell it right now. Awesome. Well, Tina, why don't you just take a moment and introduce yourself and what you do and what you're about, and just share that with our tribe.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, my background, a little interesting. My background is biotech. I was in biotech for about 20 years and then discovered positive psychology. I never had heard this word before, never knew there was a science about having a better life, being more positive, and was instantly hooked and thought, how can I share this? How can I just help other people learn that, you know, science is showing us there are benefits to positivity. There are ways we can be more positive. And so that then became my new purpose. I reinvented myself. I started my own business, The Positive Edge, and now I speak and write and train on letting people know, you know, there are things we can do that make it easier to be positive.
Well, we are definitely kindred spirits in that message. Mm-hmm. And I asked Tina off camera if she's always been positive, and she said that she has. She said that she didn't necessarily know it. Other people told her, and I said, well, it wasn't certainly my truth, that I was not a positive person. So I'm a living example that it is possible to go from being negative to being positive. So that's a fun thing, and it certainly has transformed my life to figure that out. So, well, why don't you tell us something about positive psychology? What is it? Why is it important? And all the good stuff.
You know, it's interesting. It wasn't until maybe, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago that they even termed this, coined this terminology of positive psychology. And really it was this idea that in the past, psychology had been more about, how can we help people who are suffering to, have a more normal life? And then there was this whole idea of like, wait a minute, what if we were to look at those people who are really flourishing and enjoying life, and what if we could take the average person and move them up higher on the scale and make their life even better? So now this area has exploded. There's all kinds of studies being done, research labs, opportunities to earn your master's degree or certificates in this. And really the science is an umbrella for many things. I mean, mindfulness is really, related to positive psychology, emotional intelligence. I kind of look at it that there's the research showing the benefits, how this helps us, what it does in our brain, kind of the neuroscience behind the different chemistries and activations in our brain. And then the studies of what are things that we can do, what are some strategies and tips we can do that help us move in that direction and help make it easier.
So what is your number one strategy or tip? Or if there's more than one, that's okay.
I think there's a couple that are my favorites because they're super fast, super easy. You don't need any special equipment. One is if I am just kind of in a slightly down mood, maybe I'm just kind of struggling with a little, negativity. My number one hack that I love to use is the idea of a fake smile, because Professor Richie Davidson, who's actually right here at UW-Madison, he's wrote a book called The Emotional Life of Your Brain. And he's done studies that show that if you do a fake smile with just your mouth and your cheeks, nothing happens. But they can see with things like functional MRI that if you also just crinkle and activate those little muscles around your eyes, like, in a normal smile, that then they see the part of your brain associated with feeling good and being happy light up. And it's like, this is an experiment we can all run, right? We can just take those moments in the car, on the phone, in a meeting, and just say, if I just have a little smile and I make sure I'm kind of engaging those muscles around my eyes, do I feel better? And I love this. I use this all the time.
Great.
My other one that I love to share, this is more of if I'm feeling anxious or stressed, like, I'm late, I'm in a hurry. This is one, I know we've all heard this, but again, the science is showing this is true, that when we can take 3 to 5 slow, deep breaths, that it lowers our heart rate, lowers our blood pressure, right? Helps all that cortisol dissipate out of our system so we can think more clearly, make better decisions, feel better. And again, like, you don't even need an app on your phone for these things.
No, that's impossible that we don't need an app. Come on. Well, and I love what you're sharing because it's simple, right? It really is simple. And it's just a choice to do it and program that. It's funny. I was thinking this morning as I awoke, because one of the things that we teach our graduates and share is that the very first thing to do when you wake up is to smile and say, today I choose joy. And so I do that. And this morning it was like, I really connected to how much better that made me feel and how much easier it was just to pop out of bed. And but the fake smile, that's pretty funny. We talk about it at High5 that people need to practice their up downs, because smiling just in general and how many, 43 muscles in the human face, Kev?
Yes, 43.
43. That too many people don't do it enough. And it really does make us feel good. It does. Well, so you and I had an opportunity to talk about the biggest questions. I won't spoil it, but the number one question you get from people about this whole positivity thing. Will you share that with us and what you're doing about it?
Yes, thank you. And what I think is kind of interesting or crazy is, after I go into an organization or a conference and I'm sharing these strategies, I'm sharing my path for positivity framework, and people get all excited, but then they come with this one question. And it's interesting that the answer to this question is the same answer to the question when you ask people, what causes you the most stress at work? And what it comes down to is people are like, okay, if I'm working on being more positive, and if I'm using these strategies, how can I make my negative coworker, right, my negative partner be more positive or do these things too? Because it comes down to, right, this mindset, I need to fix them, I need to change them. And that, of course, is not the best or easiest answer. That can be really, really hard. When in reality, what I've learned, from positive psychology, but then also when I decided, okay, I really need a better resource to share with people around this question. So I reached out and contacted a bunch of different experts in coaching, in positive psychology, in relationships, and I interviewed 15 different people. And really, the themes that emerged, the similar themes, are that the key is to think about, how can I change the situation with this person? And the best way to change that situation is to start with ourselves, right? The one person we have the most control over. So what's been great is there's this formula that's come out of these transcripts and interviews, and it's this, I call it the immunity to negativity formula. How do we build our immunity so we can stay in control of our emotions, our reactions, despite what the people around us are going through, right? Whether they're discouraged, whether they're whining, whether they're, bragging, whatever it is that triggers us.
I was watching the faces around the screen when you brought up the question, because every single one of our team knows that that's the question that we hear the most as well. So we are no stranger to that question. Have we gotten any questions from Facebook yet?
Yes, we have. One of the questions we have was, so the stuff you were talking about positivity, does that work on clinical, in parentheses, biological depression?
Yeah, so what's interesting is there's definitely, research and studies that show that these same approaches that have really, I think, been researched and targeted for the average person can help clinical depression too. It's not a replacement for therapy, of course. I'm not a therapist, I can't give advice, but the studies that I've seen talk about it being a great adjunct, a great addition to even amplify other treatments, other approaches.
That makes sense. Awesome.
Yeah.
We did have a fun comment when we were talking about the eye part of the smile. So crow's feet are joy lines, and that was pretty cool.
Yes, I am super joyful. Yay! I love it. I love it. Great answer. And the shoot, I had something. So let me put it out to the team because I lost it. Questions? Comments?
One of the things that that I find fascinating around all of this is the neuroscience of it all, right? The rewiring of the brain. I just started reading a book that talks about the science behind how thoughts become things, right? So, and what I'll say about that is, he starts off by saying, thoughts become things. The iPhone, as an example, started off because somebody thought I could do something like this, and it started with their thought, and it became a thing. So there's evidence that thoughts absolutely become things. It also is evident that thoughts don't become things. So I could think that I'm going to be a professional football player, and it will never be true that I can think it all I want. I will never be, at 50 years old, I will never be a professional football player. So it's true that thoughts don't become things. And so it's an interesting dichotomy. And the author of this book is, he's both a PhD in, he's a scientist, he's a neurobiologist, and he's also somewhat of a mystic. He believes in some of the things that can't necessarily be proven. And so part of this book is about how he's going about using science to prove those things that can't be proven. I say all of that to lay the foundation to say, so what's some of the science behind what goes on in the brain? So you talked about some of the physiological things, right? That when we smile, it lights up parts of the brain that have to do with joy. But what's some of the, from your biological background, what are some of the things that actually happen in the body as a result, or what's the science behind it, I guess, is where I'm going with all that.
And that is so huge. I'm so glad you brought that up, because really when we can start to understand that, besides the psychology of it, the neuroscience, the how our brain works is fascinating. And one of the things that came to my mind as you were sharing that example, that was, again, one of these aha moments for me, was whether we actually experience something. So let's say somebody cuts you off on the freeway and you have to hit the brakes, and it's a little bit scary, and you get mad because this person was being a bad driver and not paying attention. When we experience that, we have a physical reaction, right? Our stress response goes up, our cortisol goes up, all these things physically and chemically happen. But if we just remember that story, play back that experience, we will have the same response. And one of the things recently that was fascinating to me is whether something is real or not real, whether it's a story or imagined, or it really happens, it is still something that we experience. It is an experience that we have, whether we create it inside here, right, or whether it actually happens. And the challenge here is, because of the way our brain is wired, we have a very strong survival instinct, which has us looking for the danger, looking for the problems, and then anticipating them, replaying them in a whole survival way of keeping us safe. But of course, if we get stuck there and we replay this and let those negative emotions create our experiences all day long, we are really giving our power over to that survival instinct. Whereas we also have this part of our brain, right, this prefrontal cortex, which gives us the power to notice what's happening and to override that survival instinct. But if we don't pay attention and do that on purpose, it doesn't necessarily happen. It takes more energy and more effort to use that part of our brain than to just let that, sort of primitive part of our brain keep us in survival mode.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and Kev, that makes just right. Makes so much sense. So one of the things that we talk about in our classes, as we talk about negative and positive, and we believe that anytime negative shows up, positive's available, but you got to go look for it. And it requires that level of awareness, right? That's exactly what you're talking about. So it's simple, but it's not easy, because literally we have to use a different part of our brain, bring that level of awareness to be able to choose something different, to write in our terminology, to write a new story. because we can either play that old story
Mhm.
over and over and over again. And you're right, Tina. I mean, literally, right? We feel it completely in our bodies again and again. And sometimes, though, we even add to that story, and now we're getting even more worked up than we were to begin with. So, right, it just keeps growing. And then we bring our friends into the story. Can you believe the jerk that cut me off, right? And now we got all of this energy. And it isn't until we can recognize that, okay, that's just a story now. And now that I keep repeating it, I keep creating the emotion rather than having that original reaction. And now it requires that level of awareness. And what I will acknowledge is it takes work to be aware.
It's
It really
easier to
does.
just go to sleep.
Yeah.
I think the emotion of fear is such a great example of all of that. So the body, one of the things we talk about in class is the body really doesn't fundamentally know the difference between fear and excitement. Excitement's like, oh, I'm getting butterflies in my stomach, and fear is more of, it's that same stomach area, except it's just more of a like raw feeling. But all that's being dictated by what we're telling ourselves, the creation that we've had. And fear is one of those really primal ones that served us really well for a really, really long time. And in most cases, not all, there's some cases that is very useful still today. But in a lot of cases, that's not as useful as it once was. And that's not to say that in the moment that the fear shows up, that is absolutely real and happening right now. And it's that awareness, it's taking that power back, being able to find the positive, change the story, all of those things that be able to turn it into something different. But it's not to say that takes away from the experience of when it's happening, because when it's happening, that is real.
It is.
Cool. Another question.
It's so true. One of the things I find.
No, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things I do is when I notice it happening, when I get better at tuning in and just say, oh, look at the story I've been telling myself, I now kind of laugh out loud. I'm like, oh, this is so funny how our brains work. And I find it entertaining. It's kind of like when commercials pop up or movies pop up, it's like, oh, look, that was such an entertaining little commercial right there.
Yeah.
I do the exact same, laugh at myself all the time.
Yeah. Well, and it helps with communication. Barb, you brought it up this morning when we were talking earlier. You and I had started on different calls. We had been starting to, and we can see, like we can even almost see the stories on each other's faces before the year even said. And then instead of like expressing the raw emotion, it's more, all right, so I have a story in my head and this is what the story is. Help me work through it. This is nothing about you. This is all about me. So help me work through this. And that's a very different way to communicate than I'm upset because you did this.
Yeah, that's some next level stuff.
Yeah.
We got a couple more questions for you, Tina. This one's from Sylvia. And she said, when does extreme positivity / optimism become just fantasy?
Ooh, that's a great question, because one of the things I like to talk about is what I call it's called the positivity ratio. Barbara Fredrickson is one of the first people who came out with this, and other people have studied it. And it's this idea of the ratio of the number of good experiences or interactions divided by the number of negative experiences or interactions. And they've done studies and have found that overall, we can flourish, we can enjoy the benefits of more positivity when that ratio is at least 3 to 1. 3 good experiences for every 1 bad one. And remembering again that these aren't just experiences that we experience outside of ourselves, but it's also the experiences, we create up here. But it's very true that you can have a ratio that is too high. I think some interesting examples you think about, well, if you're really too positive, you might say, well, gosh, I'm sure the roads aren't too icy for me to go out and go shopping or go driving, or gosh, sure, the smoke alarm went off, but I doubt if it's really that important. I shouldn't feel stressed. I'm sure it's not that big of an emergency. You know, there's that survival part that does serve a purpose. You know, danger is real, and we need to use it to our benefit and use that information.
Those are some great examples. And she's got one more question for you. She said, have you encountered someone who uses brain science as the excuse of behaving a certain way? Example, well, that's just my biology, or that's just the way I'm wired.
Wow, that's a fun one. I think what's great about that is, you know, for that one, I would use the example of neuroplasticity. You know, that again, only in the last 15, 20 years has science really realized that, yeah, we are all sort of preset with different levels of negativity and positivity, but because of this neuroplasticity, the fact that our brains can change and we can influence the rewiring, that we all have this power, this power to shift from wherever we're starting at to even get a little bit more optimistic, more grateful, more enthusiastic, more, you know, patient. So
yeah, we absolutely believe that, and that's what we teach as well. We all have programming and things that we practiced and all these years, but that we can start to make new choices, and it's awesome. So you said something that I want to dive into, because it's something that absolutely comes up for us when we talk about being positive and raising the energy and raising the vibration, and that is gratitude. And you just mentioned gratitude. So what are your thoughts about gratitude as it relates to positive psychology?
It's interesting. I never realized, but it's a whole area of study. You know, there's all these experts who devote their careers just to gratitude. And the power that it has, from everything to helping us sleep better, right, to helping us lower our stress and have better relationships. It is a great antidote to so many, I think, negative emotions, downward spirals, getting stuck, because just that purposeful, intentional thought of saying, okay, right now I'm really upset about something. I am going to notice that, and I'm going to just see if I can shift it to something that I'm grateful for. Now, sometimes it's harder than others, right? When we're in the cortisol, when we're really frustrated, it might be just a calming down or distraction first, and then moving into gratitude. If we're really in the throes of a strong emotion that's negative, it can be hard. But that's when I love to tell people a distraction is a great tool at that point. You know, say, how can I just stop this downward spiral and this ruminating on this thing that's just making me crazy?
It is a distraction. It reminds me of a woman. So I had lunch with a whole bunch of people today for a business alliance group that I'm in, and she was talking about that she and her husband were home a lot more right after she had a baby, and she noticed that he made this sound with his jaw, and it was distracting to her, and it was driving her crazy. And she's like, could you stop that? And he's like, no, I don't even recognize it. And I was laughing. And it's just a perfect little example of what gets our attention, right? And can drive us crazy, and all of the things that she loves about this man, right? And what a good father he is, and all of that. But the thing that she couldn't get past in that moment was whatever was going on with his jaw. And that's what happens. We focus on the things we don't like, things that get our attention, versus all of the good things, the things that we do like. And that's what I love about the whole gratitude practice, is it's just that shift, right, to what do we like. So thinking about positive, being positive, and if we could just get everybody in the world to, when they're focused on something they don't like about somebody, just think of one thing that they like about that person, how much better off we would all be. And it's what we talked about earlier, though. It's raising that level of awareness when I'm focused on all of those things that are just little things that really don't matter. But yeah, so gratitude is definitely one of our favorite things to talk about, because it really is the easiest way to shift. And even if I'm irritated, say I'm irritated at Chad, even if in that moment, because I'm really in a tizzy about him, I can't find something to be grateful for about him, which wouldn't be true, by the way, anybody. But if I could just find something to be grateful about, period. And as you said, that would be the distraction, right? It would shift my thinking away from whatever that was. And just, so it doesn't even necessarily have to be about that person. So cool. Throwing it back to the team. Do we have any more questions, or do you guys have any questions?
So there's no other questions on Facebook, but a question I was thinking about, Tina, is, what's been your biggest aha? I know you said you had a couple ahas, but what's been your biggest aha as you've kind of gone through this whole journey of learning? What were the big ahas, and what would you say is the simplest thing that's easy to do and easy not to do, that if you do it makes the biggest difference in terms of being positive?
Mm-hmm. I think the aha, there's actually two really big ones for me. And one is that, I never knew how strong this survival instinct thing was, how we are they call it the negativity bias, that on average, scientists estimate that we are 5 times more focused on anything negative than on something positive. And for me, I think that was like, really, wow, I had no idea. That not only helps me understand a little bit about, my internal voice, but it also is a big aha for thinking about other people in my life. And the fact that studies have shown that probably at least 50% of our negativity is attributed to genetics, just how we're wired at birth. So that really put me in a different mindset about thinking about some people in my life. And, they're not trying to drive me crazy. That's how they're wired. And the second thing was that I never had heard or never learned about the fact that I do have a choice. When I am feeling stuck, when I am getting discouraged, when I am focused on something about somebody who's, that they're driving me nuts, that I actually have this power that I can shift. And the idea that we can shift our thinking, influence our thinking, rewire our brains to make it easier to do that, I'm like, whoa, how come we don't learn this stuff in school, right? Or there should be. This seems pretty powerful and important here.
It is. That's why we exist.
And I think the second part of your question, what is one of the simplest things, or things that, the most easiest thing I have found, I think, does come back to gratitude. I think I love gratitude when I wake up in the morning. I love gratitude before I go to bed at night. I love gratitude when I'm driving somewhere. I made it an intention a few years ago to try to surround myself and infuse myself with gratitude and use different triggers, like going to bed, getting up, green lights, driving, just different things in my everyday to remind me about it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, I like that, right? Using different things as anchors, triggers to do that.
Well,
Really
and that speaks to your favorite quote, BMO. Gratitude is the express elevator to joy.
Yeah.
That, by the way, Tina, is a Barb-ism. Feel free to share.
The genetics part that you talk about, that's really interesting for me, and it makes sense, right? It's just brain chemistry, brain wiring, and of course, where does that stuff come from? It's going to come from our genes, but fundamentally. So I know that throughout my journey, and I know this is not, I'm not the only one of our students that has shared this with us, but family had been one of the biggest like negativity sources that was tough to navigate. And what was that going to look like in the short term? What was that going to look like in the long term? And part of the answer is most of the time it just kind of evolves into what it's going to become. And there's still times where can be an interesting navigating maze. And I also see where I was. Sometimes it's a mirror to where I was 10 years ago. So to go back to to Sylvia's question about, that's just the way I'm wired. Like for me, that's just a story that I'm choosing to own. Just like I'm a negative person. I'm just negative. I'm a realist. I was a realist.
Oh, I was too.
Oh, yes. The realist. Yes.
I'm not a morning person. Even for our students on the call that have gone through the DISC process, the behavioral assessment, I'm a high D, I'm a high C, and that's just how I am. So that's just how it is. It's all just a story that I've chosen to own instead of taking my power over the story and creating something different.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I wonder though, so as you guys were talking about that, the thing that keeps coming up in my mind is they talk about the three brains or the three levels of our brain, right? We got the old, was it the alligator brain, which is like the primitive brain that truly is just fight or flight. And then there's what's the next one? There's a monkey brain, and then there's another brain. I don't remember what they all are, but I just wonder how much, that old, the crocodile brain, truly the reptilian fight or flight, how much of that, because you've talked about it a little bit tonight, Tina, that whole survival and fear and danger sensing, I don't know. It's fascinating to me how much of that do we have choice over versus just true biological, chemical. It's just how it is. Any insight on any of that?
Yeah, I think, again, that is so helpful for people to understand. If everybody could just understand that primitive part of our brain, the alligator reptilian part, requires no effort, no energy, no attention from us. It is super fast, super instinctive. So really where the practice comes in and where we have to get better at taking back our power over that is just knowing that it's like that, understanding that, getting better at noticing it, right? The pause, the notice, the emotional intelligence, the mindfulness piece. Because when you can do that, when you can start saying, oh, look at this happening, look at this story, look at this reaction, that is then when you get the power to choose. And it's hard, especially at first. It takes, it's like I have to override this instinct to want to snap, to yell, or whatever that survival thing is telling us to do, and just check it and be like, oh, that's really not helpful. That's not my best self. That's not what is going to make this situation better right now. But when we can start practicing the choose part, the pause, notice, choose, that's part of my immunity to negativity formula. The first part is prepare and practice ahead of time, and then it's pause, notice, choose in the moment. But when we can start doing that on the easy stuff, I always love to tell people, life is going to give you so many opportunities every day to do this and to practice it. You will have so many chances to just get better at this on the little things.
Awesome.
So true. So we have a saying that leadership is a practice and positivity is a practice, right? It really is. It takes practice. And the time to practice is all the time, but when it's easy, so that when those situations come up that are harder, that you have that to fall back on, right? That's the whole neuroplasticity thing and reprogramming. And you know, it's training our brain that, you know, we aren't running from the bears anymore, and things like that.
The last time I ran from a saber-toothed tiger was first of never. So Alden has a question. He says, do you have any suggestions for distractions? Sometimes even with awareness and support, it can be a challenge to shift to positivity. And I asked him to say more about that. And he says, I like what she said about a distraction being a step before a full-on shift to gratitude. So any suggestions for distraction?
Yeah, so that's one of my favorite things I love to do during my talks is to just share a few ideas and then get ideas from the audience. So sometimes we do paper airplane ideas where we all write down an idea on a paper airplane and we throw them around the room. But some of my favorite ones are, you know, music can be a great distraction. Having that playlist on our devices that, you know, are just there to help us shift, maybe calm us down, maybe pull us out of some, you know, negativity. Getting up, going for a walk, exercise, yoga, movement of any kind can be a great distraction. Another one I love is, you know, other people, when we can pick up the phone or walk down the hallway and chat with someone that is not going to necessarily commiserate with us, but can help us maybe vent for a moment, shift out of it. Things like pets, spending time with our pets. My favorite, most creative one, though, that I've heard so far, cheese sauce. Now, I'm from Wisconsin, okay? So this was a meeting in Wisconsin, and someone said, my greatest way to distract myself from negativity is cheese sauce. I'm like, okay.
Nice.
That sounds like one of our friends, Miss Diana Miranda.
Yeah.
She's herself.
Hey, Tina, one of the things that you said that I found so fascinating at the Tony Robbins thing, because he also clearly is a big believer in body movement, right? And he talked about changing state. So a lot of those things that you just talked about, really what that's all about is changing our state, right? And the thought can start the state change. But what I found really, truly fascinating at the Tony Robbins thing was how much of that body movement and the making of just sounds, right? Not even words, but just vocalizing and all of that, and how all of that stuff really changed state. Doing any of those things, I think, would be a big help. But that whole body movement thing, you know, getting up. I like now that my watch tells me, you know, I've been sitting here for 30 minutes. I'm supposed to get up and move around. But any of that, but specifically the physical, you know, shake it out, get up, jump up and down, pound your chest, whatever. But doing something physical to change that physical space, I think, is a big one.
Yeah, our friend Stephen Jackson said, "Ooh, running rewires the brain." Mr. Running himself. So,
Indeed.
Yeah, and that's a big one for me is exercise. Definitely. Awesome.
I know one of this whole idea of the mind-body connection, you know, which is really in tune with exactly what we're talking about. So some of the things I do sometimes in my talks, and I've learned this, I have a dear friend who's very much into things like kinesiology. But if you stand inside, but even outside, if you stand outside, you raise your hands up to the sky and you look up and you put that fake smile on your face and you say, I'm happy, you know, your body posture is telling your brain, oh gosh, she must be happy. She's smiling. She has a big open pose. She's looking up. So all of these signals in our body are telling our brain, well, gosh, things must be good. She must be happy. And pretty soon it sets off that signaling cascade. And again, I love this because we can do our own experiments. I always say to people, put your hands up and smile and say, I feel horrible, and see what happens. Usually people laugh because it's so incongruent that it's like, no, I can't even believe that. You know, my body is not saying that to my brain.
That's a good one. Sunshine's another one of mine. Just walking out in the sunshine. That'll do it for me. Awesome. And Alden says thank you for all those great ideas. So beautiful. Well, Anything else, guys? Or are we ready to wrap?
I'm good.
So Tina, will you tell our listeners what your website is, and if they want to get on your email list or anything like that, or anything else you want us to know before we wrap up?
So ways that I try to spread positivity are, I have free weekly tips. They're like a 3-minute read. People can go to my website and sign up for them under positivity tips. It's just like another way to infuse our life and our day with a little bit of positivity. I have a book out called Sharpen Your Positive Edge. It has 80 different short little tips in it. There's an ebook, there's a hardcover book. It's on Amazon and all your favorite book places. And I'm really excited because in the next couple of months, I'm going to be launching this online course about keeping our positive edge, how to build our immunity to people's negativity. So anyone who's signed up for the weekly tips will get notified when that's coming out. And I have other just free resources on my website of books I love, websites. Check it out and find things that resonate with you. Find what works for you and then share it.
We're all about the sharing piece of that. Beautiful. Wow. Thank you. It's been such a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing with our community. And I don't think this is the last time that we'll talk. I feel very confident that we'll stay in touch. And I encourage all y'all out there to to sign up for Tina's newsletter, her positivity tips. I have done that myself, and because you know what, this is a practice, and it's about progress, not perfection. And let's just, every time we make one more positive choice in our day and with the people in our relationships, the world gets better. And that's what we're going to celebrate. So it is about changing your world so that together we change the world.
Yeah. Tina's website is www.thepositiveedge.org. So Nancy was asking for the website, thepositiveedge.org.
Is that correct?
Thank you, Kevin.
That's what's on her card.
Yeah.
I went to positiveedge.net, so they must go to the same.
Awesome.
Must, yes.
Yep.
They must go to the same.
Alignment.
Well, you're getting somebody else's positivity tips.
I am not. Tina's picture was on there. I know. All right. I just want to make sure we gave out the right one. So, well, Tina, thank you. High5 team, thank you. And yeah, let's all just go be positive. And to all y'all out there that have joined us tonight, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being part of our
And if you want your teens to be more positive, we've got a teen class coming up in July.
Oh, yeah, we do.
If you want more information, reach out about our teen class, July 13th and 14th in College Station, Texas.
We are utilizing Texas A&M state-of-the-art challenge course as part of that class as well. So huge experience for the teens. 13 to 17. Jinx.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Have a
Love
great
you.
Thank you.
Choose joy.
Thanks,
Bye.
Tina.
Choose joy.
Bye-bye.
All right. So
Bye, Tina. Thank you.
live stream.